Hello again, everyone. This is Bionic Slime. I'm your online voice for reviews of your choice, and this is another installment of BS Reviews. Today, I will be reviewing the second installment in the infamously popular Twilight franchise series, based off the popular books written by Stephanie Meyer, entitled The Twilight Saga: New Moon. Now, I just want to state right off the bat that I have never really been a big supporter or fan of this franchise. I don't particularly care for how they portray the vampires and werewolves in the films. I think they're kind of grossly uninteresting compared to, older vampires and werewolves. I'm a big old movie monster kind of guy, so I liked how they were, and I don't like this constant changing of their powers, abilities, weaknesses, and all that, particularly with Twilight. But I saw the first film, never read the books. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't really interesting enough to make me want to stick with it. But circumstances changed, and I ended up seeing the second film. And, well, you'll hear my comments about that in a minute. New Moon is brought to you by Imprint Entertainment and was directed by Chris Weitz. The screenplay was written by Melissa Rosenberg, based off the novel by Stephanie Meyer, as I said before. It stars Kristen Stewart as Bella Swan, Taylor Lautner as Jacob Black, Robert Pattinson as Edward Cullen, Billy Burke as Charlie Swan, Ashley Greene as Alice Cullen, Michael Sheen as Arrow, and Dakota Fanning as Jane. The plot of Twilight Saga: New Moon. Bella is constantly fearing that she will age and no longer be beautiful and pretty to last forever with her eternal, immortal looking boyfriend, Edward Cullen. Unfortunately, her interest in becoming a vampire to join the Cullens family forever has made Edward feel neglectful and hurt, so he decides to leave to go away from Bella, saying that he is not good for her and that they would probably be better off staying away from each other for a while. This separation unfortunately devastates Bella to the point of near psychological breakdown, where she starts hallucinating, hearing, and seeing Edward almost everywhere. During this time, she latches onto Jacob Black, an old friend from the first film, who later turns out to be part of a werewolf pack that has sworn a hatred against all vampires. And then when Edward discovers a horrible accident has supposedly befallen Bella, he threatens to expose himself to the world and to the Volturi vampire clan, who kill vampires who expose their secret. Bella must now go to find Edward and ultimately choose between who she wants to spend the rest of her life and share her heart with, between Edward Cullen or Jacob Black. Review the plot. The thing I like about this story from the beginning was that it created a much more interesting problem than before. Whereas originally it was just focused on the relationship, here there is a relationship, but it's split down the middle because you have an interesting problem with Jacob Black and Edward Cullen. And I'll be honest, one of the things I've never really particularly loved about the franchise is that it focuses solely on the relationship. Now, you may not know this, but I'm actually a big sucker for romances, and I love couples and pairings and stuff like that. I even like to do that with characters who you may not think would go together with. But the problem is the relationship to me doesn't really have a lot of spark or heart to it. The dialogue and the desire is there, but I don't really feel that connection when I see it on film. This, however, is thankfully rectified with the introduction of Jacob Black, as he makes a much more interesting and, in a sense, more realistic attraction to Bella, whereas Edward and Bella's attraction just seemed mostly psychotic, like instantaneous obsession. Jacob Black brings a nice sense of realism and more plausibility, I think, to the whole level of the relationship. But the big thing I loved about this is that it introduced much more mythology to the vampires and the werewolves. This whole pack of creatures that Jacob Black goes with, particularly the Volturi, an ancient vampire race, were the kind of the upper vampire lords. I found that much more fascinating than the whole love story, personally. And even though I wish they would have elaborated it on a little bit more, I felt that it gave a nice, better sense of balance to the story than just relying solely on the relationship, which I think plenty of people got enough of in the first film, or at least I did anyway. Um, Review the characters. I know people like characters sticking with the same actors, but I'll be perfectly honest when I say I never particularly cared for Kristen Stewart. I've seen her in a couple films, Zathura, Jumper, and Panic Room, and I just don't care for her. I think she is too bland of an average personality, and I don't think she really puts that much effort, or at least it doesn't look like it to me. And to have a whole series of movies focused around her doesn't really help. So I really never cared for her performance here, just like I didn't care for her in the original Twilight. I don't think she's that good of an actress, personally. I mean, she had a couple moments where she seemed to break out a little in here, but nothing really that impressive. Robert Pattinson was kind of a mix. I actually thought he was better in the first film. The latter half in the film, he was actually better on. The first half, he was kind of dull and dry, and there was even a couple points where he looked like he was stoned with the way he was talking to Bella. And I think he's better out of the two, but like I said before, I think he pulled off a better performance in the original film. Easily, and I think most critics have agreed with me on this, is that the bigger, more impressive star is Jacob Black's Taylor Lautner. He's much more impressive physically, facially, and emotionally. I think he gives a much better sense of emotion and sincerity in his actions than any of the other actors in the cast here. I mean, granted, I know for all the girls he's glorious man candy. I mean, the guy is so freaking ripped and so charmingly good looking that this guy looks freaking gorgeous. And I really think that they picked a great actor who fits the look and the sense of character for the character he's playing. I really just think he just did a great job, and he pulled off what I think was the best performance of out of all the characters here. Billy Burke, kind of a waste as Charlie Swan. He's pretty much non-existent in the film, almost as much as he was in the first film. Same with most of the other side characters. I really liked Michael Sheen's Arrow. I wish they would have used him more. I always liked like I said, the expanded vampire mythology with the Volturi. And Dakota Fanning, you didn't really see enough of, so I really can't judge her. They kind of wasted her, and I think she's supposed to be in more of the other films, but I don't know for sure. All I know is that for now, she really didn't do that good of a job. Review the cinematography and the music. Music was, it kind of all sounded the same, kind of a whispery, wimpy, softy kind of teeny emo music. It just kind of played the same mood and emotion over throughout the film. A feeling that was ultimately enforced in the first film, and I really didn't, like I said, care for the first film as much. But one thing I do have to say is that the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. This film takes place in a lot of forest shots, cliff shots, like nature shots, and particularly when they go to, I think it was Italy, for Volturi to meet them. Beautiful shots of the city. You get some really nice forest shots when Bella's looking for Jacob and them in the forest and that. This movie just has some really just gorgeous scenery all around, and I was quite impressed with how beautiful the film looked with all of its shots. I mean, it was very well proportioned from every angle that you got enough of every scene, of every area, that it looked so much more vibrant and realistic. You actually felt you were there. Flaws about the film. As I said, I honestly did not care for Kristen Stewart, and I felt that Robert Pattinson was pretty weak in here in the first half. Most of the other characters were pretty much non-existent in terms of their participation. I really, as I said before, do not care for the rules that have been established for the vampires. But I think the biggest thing that I have to complain about this film is that the things that I found more interesting were ultimately less focused on, and just don't like the fact that the relationship drowns out the whole series. Now, for those of you who like that, I'm glad that maybe that's such a big thrill for you. But for me, I feel that it suffocates the story too much, that you can't allow anything else to happen. For example, there was a black vampire with dreadlocks who was in the first film, Laurent, I think his name is, who was only in here for like maybe 5 minutes. And then same with like the Volturi and exploring more about the werewolves. All of the more interesting things about the film I felt were ignored. I just would like to see a little bit more about this new clans and mythology and creatures you're bringing in instead of the same relationship shtick. Final wrap up. I'm not a big fan of the Twilight Saga, and even after seeing this, I'm still not. But I do have to say, this is definitely a much more better, interesting ride than the first film. You got a nice new character and actor star with Taylor Lautner's Jacob Black. They introduced several new interesting elements, like with this new Volturi vampire clan, who are very cool and creepy. And you got the new werewolf thing. The werewolf effects actually look pretty good, and some of the acting does step up a bit, but ultimately it still gets suffocates by the relationship too much to really shine out as anything different than the first one. I did not like Kristen Stewart or Robert Pattinson here as much. All the newer stuff really should have gotten more attention, whereas the older stuff just got way too much of it. but I do have to say this is a step up from the first. Bottom line, I give Twilight Saga New Moon 2 stars out of 5 stars. Well, that's all for now. This has been Bionic Slime for BS Reviews. Thank you all for listening, and goodbye for now.